I wonder if I might just say a couple of broader things about university finances and then ask Ian to say more about how UKRI monitors its spend into universities. I think the first thing I'd say is just on some of the universities that you listed there, their balance sheets or some of those universities, their balance sheets are very strong. And so the deficits that they may have in any one year might be a deliberate decision because they're investing particularly hard in that particular year, but they're doing so on the basis of a balance sheet that means that that's a perfectly legitimate decision for the university to be making. And you know, we shouldn't be looking to control that, I think, because they're independent institutions. Equally, though, I think some of the universities you name, the deficits probably are worrying, and they may not have the balance sheet position that means they can run a deficit like that year after year. And so I think the second thing I'd say is that we are looking very hard at university financing and sustainability. Ministers made the decision as part of the spending review to protect and indeed continue to increase the proportion of research funding that goes to universities as a block grant, as it were, to ensure that there's that stable footing for universities. And tuition fees, after a long period for domestic students, after a long period of being flat, are going to increase again in line with inflation. I suppose the other thing that universities would say is that financial position is driving some different business decisions by them. And so we're seeing some key decisions about consolidation. Just in the last few weeks, King's College London and Cranfield University have announced that they're going to be merging some of their operations. We've seen other instances of that. Again, I don't think it's for us as a department to adjudicate on those. They're independent institutions. It's for them to make those decisions. But it feels like those decisions, especially that one, I think feels like a good way of protecting the research strengths of both of those universities.
Well, with merger comes dislocation, as you know. I don't need to tell you that. But I mean, this 5.6 billion, clearly there is an issue of underinvestment, which is affecting research, isn't it? I mean, is that not what you're saying, what the NAO is saying here in paragraph 3.6?
Do you mind if I come back on a few things there? To start with, I think we should remind ourselves that our universities are a huge national asset. The fact that we have 4 universities in the top 10 in the world is a massive asset for this country, and we should exploit it more. And it's not just a few. We have 17 in the top 100, so we have both depth and breadth. Your comment about our approach to portfolio management, can I pick up on that? So we really do oversee all of our infrastructure as a portfolio, be that physical infrastructure or digital infrastructure or maintenance of infrastructure. They are seen as a portfolio of investments, which is the right thing to do, and it allows us to change spend profiles on individual projects so that we can meet an overall spend profile. And we do that actively. We manage it actively as a portfolio. Your point about the condition of the estate, so the report rightly acknowledges...
I think it's a question.
Yeah, absolutely. So the report rightly acknowledges that to maintain the existing estate, we have a deficit. What it doesn't assess is whether we want to maintain that existing estate. So that is all of the infrastructure that exists at the moment, but we should be constantly making active priority decisions and saying that investment that we made 20 years ago, do we want to maintain that piece of infrastructure, or do we want to now offboard it? And we should be constantly making those decisions, and that is not addressed in the report. It just says to maintain the existing portfolio. So the portfolio of things that we want to maintain is smaller than that number, and therefore we think is manageable within our settlements. And then lastly, you asked about China and fraud. Let me just address those two things. So when we make investments into universities, we have a very clear policy on what we call trusted research and innovation, which outlines the expectations of our investment and how that is protected and how it is used in the nation's interests, and the partners with which we can work on different subjects. So there's a very clear policy on that, upon which all of our investees, universities or centres or catapults or companies, all have to abide by that policy. And then lastly on fraud. So we take this very seriously. We are spending public money, and many of the endeavours and ventures that we're investing in are very early stage, and they are risky. They are risky ventures. Just to give you comfort, so for 24-25, last financial year, our fraud rate was 0.01%, so very low. And Actually, error was bigger than fraud. Even our error rate was 0.1%, most of which we recovered. So I think we do a very good job of managing fraud over a big portfolio.
You're obviously happy that you're directing your investment into infrastructure correctly on that basis.
Yes. We have an
Can I just
exceptional
come on
portfolio.
the back of this? The NAO in page 37, 3.6 say that the Office for Students estimates that 45% of providers, as university providers, are on course to operate with a deficit. Now, I hear what you say about there may be particular reasons why somebody's running at a deficit, but you also highlighted the Cranfield King's merger, and I suspect that is likely to go on. There will be more consolidation in the university sector, particularly if news headlines are right that the number of students is dropping off, people choosing not to go to university is reducing. Are you absolutely sure that Sir Ian is investing in universities that are going to be there, and the
users work out exactly what industry wanted from that platform and gone from start to finish in 6 months? So we can move quickly when we need to, when the opportunity arises. Yeah.
Brilliant. Okay, thank you. That's it from me. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Rupert, please.
Me again, I'm afraid. So intellectually, as I said, I don't like this centrally planned approach, but let's assume, as you say, Sir Ian, you've now whipped it into shape and you feel you've got on top of it. Michelle says you're doing it very well, so we're encouraged to hear that. But I think for me what's interesting, and the question I have is, if you are going to have this approach to using taxpayers' money to take risk and develop new businesses in the cutting edge sort of sphere of where we're going, and as Geoffrey says, I do quite a lot of EIS investment myself, so I do understand that. But I also understand that what often happens with early stage companies, you invest quite a lot of money on several rounds to takes a lot longer than you think to get somewhere, and then it explodes. And what tends to happen, and we saw it with SoftBank buying Arm, there's actually countless examples of US companies and other companies, US particularly, who are more on the ball than us, who basically wait for this long gestation period. They spot the growth and then they buy the business at a crucial time after a lot of the risk has been taken by our taxpayers. So I think the question the committee would like to know is given that you're doing it the way you're doing it, and given you feel you're doing it well and you're on top of it, if you do come up with a company which is going to change things, and we know Britain is very good at innovating, a lot of the best inventions come from Britain, a lot of the best sports come from Britain, virtually everything good comes from Britain originally. But often we then let ourselves down by not capitalising on the actual brilliance of the idea. So how can you reassure us that you are going to protect the interests of the taxpayer and actually let them enjoy the benefits of the risk they've taken and not give that to somebody else, which I suspect has been happening in the past?
Yeah, perhaps if I come in on the government aspects of this and then ask Ian to follow on. I think the first thing I'd say is, we do look very closely at the comparison to the US, and I think in some respects now the UK is in a much stronger position than we used to be vis-a-vis the US. When you look at venture capital as a proportion of GDP in the UK, we're now almost at US levels, and that was certainly not the case 10 years ago. So that gap has closed massively. The other thing I think that sometimes we don't notice about the US system is the US system also spends a lot on public R&D. So even a massive company such as SpaceX, much of their early technology and some of their earliest contracts were government contracts and government funding. But then I think the key question is exactly as you say, how do we support those companies to go from early stage to scale properly and for the benefits of that to be in the UK? And that is where we certainly have a challenge. And I think the challenge is there on both respects that you mentioned. It's there in terms of the availability of capital. We have much less growth capital available in the UK than other countries do. We're in a stronger position than most of Europe, but not as strong as the US. That's why the government's been so focused on bringing more pension capital into that growth stage, and the British Business Bank helping to cornerstone some of that private capital. But I think the move there has probably been slower than we would have liked to see. I think we're starting to see some pension funds move now. We'd love to see more of that happen. They certainly have enough capital to deploy, And if that growth capital could come more, if it could come from pension funds,
we
then I
avoid
think
an
we'd be in a
intellectual
stronger
debate
position.
on whether it's right for pension funds to be taking vast amounts of early stage risk, but yeah.
But they would do it on a portfolio basis, yeah.
I'm more interested in the money you're spending, actually capitalising on that.
Yeah, and Ian will talk a bit about kind of some of the changes they're making in the portfolio, especially in Innovate UK, to support companies on that escalator. I think for our part, there's a key role here for government procurement as well. Lots of the technology that we're talking about here either has dual uses, so it has uses in defence and security, or it has uses that are useful to government for other reasons. And so we should be a better customer of some of this technology. And through doing so, we can help these companies to grow. And that's why I picked out earlier the examples in relation to high-performance computing and quantum computing. These are two obvious cases where government is a customer in the market, by no means the only customer, but it's a significant customer. And we should absolutely use our power as a customer to help UK companies to grow.
Well,
I don't think we've done that historically, and I think we do need to do that much more.
I think that's a very good point. The committee would agree with you on that. I mean, on Monday we heard Sizewell C, which is basically spending vast amounts of money on aging technology coming in from France rather than using modular technology which Rolls-Royce has developed. So I think you're right about government. There's not a lot of joined-up thinking. But and to your point also, a lot of the things that you are investing in, and Surian has mentioned some of them, rely on cheap power, because power lies at the heart of almost every innovation now. And Britain has the most lunatic energy policy, which means we have the most expensive energy almost in the world. So energy lies, and that's why Musk's trying to put stuff nearer the sun so he can generate more power more cheaply, and he can drive all of these supercomputers and all of the development he's going to do. So do you feel that this energy policy is holding you back in what you're trying to achieve?
So we are conscious of many of the companies that we want to see win do have high and escalating energy costs. That's something that companies raise with us a lot. It's one of the reasons why on the latest energy support scheme that the Department for Business has launched, we were very keen to see more science and technology companies being able to benefit from that. And the scope of it does allow them to benefit, and the Department for Business is currently working through that process. So I think that will be helpful to many of the companies that we want to see grow. We also agreed with the Department for Energy and Net Zero as part of their as part of the AI Growth Zones programme, that in parts of the country where there is renewable energy available, and indeed an excess sometimes of renewable energy available, people who are setting up AI growth zones in those areas will see some of the benefit of that in the energy costs that they pay. So I think very mindful of the energy price issue for the companies that we want to support grow, and it is definitely something that we are chipping away at.
Again, let's not get into a philosophical debate. A lot of those renewable energy sources are heavily subsidised by the taxpayer in another way, as you know, so they pay for it in the end. Now, the next question I had, which I think the committee is interested to know, is are you actually actively encouraging private sector investment alongside you? Because intellectually, in my life, when I've been involved in businesses, that's where the ideas come from. They come from being involved in businesses which are innovating. Because if you're sitting with a clean sheet of paper, you can never, which the communists found this with the USSR, you can't sit there and centrally plan things. You actually need to be involved with industries that are innovating, and they will then pull you overboard. So are you actually actively looking, I think this is probably for you, Surian, at co-investing or encouraging the government to give businesses tax breaks? I mean, EIS is a functioning tax break, but you could give them research tax breaks, R&D tax breaks against their P&L. And that arguably would then devolve rather than accrete this sort of selection process which you're talking about. So are you actually looking at that?
Almost everything we do is done in consort with business. Indeed, the high-level objectives that the government set for UKRI on bucket 2 and bucket 3 is that we will leverage 3-to-1 private investment compared to our investment. And actually, I think there are parts of our portfolio where we'll do considerably better than 3-to-1. We also actively run schemes which are done together with companies. I'll pick one. We run a scheme called Prosperity Partnerships, where Business has to come in alongside and match any investment that we would put into it, but they get to co-own the IP that's generated as a result of that scheme. So it's done in consort. We've just run the latest scheme of that, massively oversubscribed. So
is that
we
developing?
do it all the time.
Is that developing now? That's a new development, is it?
We've been running prosperity partnerships for many, many years, actually. We are scaling them, so we're putting more and more money into that and working in closer consort with business all the time. Yeah.
You think that's a good development?
I totally, absolutely in favour of that, and I think it's a direction of travel where I described our mission before, to advance knowledge, improve lives and drive growth. The part on driving growth has been less overt from UKRI in the past. We've been doing it, but we've been less overt about it, and I think signalling that we are a partner for business and we want to work much more concertedly with business, I think is a good thing for us to do.
So maybe, have you yet cracked the fusion conundrum, and are you going to deliver us this cheap energy, Surian? Is that on the way?
I think these are questions for DESNZ and the UK Atomic Energy Authority rather than me anymore.
Thank you.
I want to follow Rupert's questions, and it follows an old prejudice of mine that we give too much basic research away to the rest of the world. They then exploit it and come back with commercial, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, I think the committee is keen to understand that when you get some over-optimistic assumptions and some projects that arguably are about to fail, that you actually identify them and deal with it. And I think, when I read that on page 26, paragraph 2.6, of the 24 projects underway in December 25 and funded by the Infrastructure Fund, 58% reported they expect to achieve their agreed outcomes and were not facing any major issues which significantly threatened delivery. That means 42% obviously did face issues. So how are you dealing with that?
Yeah, so that is exactly why I said to Sarah earlier that I think that the benefit of managing things as a portfolio allows you to take risks. And frankly, we should have some projects which hit some issues because we're doing things that have never been done before. And when you're doing things that have never been done before, you are bound to find speed bumps in the road. And the important thing is that we manage those speed bumps, we manage those course corrections, and we don't overspend on the portfolio. And we have done that. So year on year, for the last 5 years, the infrastructure portfolio has come in on budget because we can manage the ebbs and flows of challenges that we have when we're doing things for the first time.
So on that basis, Surian, how did you get an issue such as this one with the airborne laboratory, where it looked to me like somebody had approved it and then it got junked? How did that happen?
Yeah, so it's a great example because you've just challenged us to make sure that we're always looking for value for money, and we should always be looking for value for money. We made an investment into environmental science 5 years ago. The world has moved in 5 years, and we can do many more things using airborne drones, for instance, and unmanned vehicles, and the ground-based diagnostics have improved considerably as well. And so the value for money of putting infrastructure onto a plane, as the costs of operating the infrastructure, of operating the plane were going up, the number of users were going down, and so the value for money deteriorated over that time. Instead of putting good money after bad, we curtailed the project. That has released 5 million of unspent money, and all the 30 million of operational costs that we would have spent operating that plane, we are putting back into environmental science.
I accept that, but I ask again, I mean, ultimately somebody made the decision to put that extra money into the airborne lab. So are you telling me that at the time they made that decision, they didn't have the available facts they subsequently had?
That's correct.
So
the world moves. Things change, technology advances.
This was basically risk capital that the taxpayer took a punt on and lost. Is that what you're saying?
And I think sometimes we will do that.
So,
sometimes
you think
we'll make investments.
That process is managed fine?
Completely robust.
So when the NAOs say in paragraph 2.9 on page 28, we have previously observed that the costs are more likely to rise if project sponsors have vested interest in ensuring projects are funded, which can lead to over-optimism not being challenged or even to deliberate underestimation. So is that a concern to you?
It's a concern. That's exactly why we have an independent advisory committee looking at this. We have two mitigations for this. Firstly, we have independent scrutiny of every assessment that goes through. And by the way, most capital projects across government, over-optimism is a problem. It's not restricted to us. But we have independent assessment of those, and we force contingency and management reserve into the budgeting to start with. And then secondly, and we use this increasingly, we will often do tranched programs. So we'll give a tranche of money to do more detailed assessment of the costs and the whole life costs of a project. That might take 2 or 3 years of seeding money to get to a detailed plan, rather than relying on a non-detailed plan for cost estimates up front. We'll do a phasing with a gateway, at which point we say, okay, now that we've got full detailed costings, do we wish to proceed into the second phase of this, now that we've got greater clarity about cost and value for money? And for sure, that risks some nugatory spend, because we will invest a small amount of money up front, and aside from training people and developing skills, exploring that, if the project doesn't go, then you could contend it's nugatory spend. But it's a small amount, and it gives us a better estimation and a better forecast for managing our forward projects. So I think it's the right thing to do.
So you're reassuring me that you're not working on the basis of what I call the bizarre theory, which is if you buy enough tickets in the tombola, in the end you come up with a cheap bottle of wine. You're telling me that's not the case, is that right?
Correct.
This is the public record. You have just watched 15 minutes of a Public Accounts Committee hearing on university research infrastructure spending. Let me summarise what was confirmed on the parliamentary record today and what was not. Confirmed, UKRI does not have an overarching framework to monitor and evaluate the performance of research infrastructure. That is the NAO's own finding. Confirmed, 6 major universities are currently running significant deficits. Cambridge 53 million, Coventry 60 million, Brunel 56 million, Essex 22 million, Derby 23 million, Cardiff 31 million. Confirmed. The Office for Students estimates that 45% of university providers are on course to operate with a deficit. Confirmed, a £5.6 billion gap exists between what is needed to restore university research infrastructure to fully operational condition and what is currently being invested. Confirmed, UKRI puts more than 80% of its funding into universities. It does not monitor how those universities spend the money on staffing. Confirmed, an airborne laboratory project was funded and then cancelled. The officials confirmed this was risk capital the taxpayer took a punt on and lost. What was not confirmed today, whether the taxpayers' money is being spent on research rather than on administrative roles. Rupert Lowe named 4 specific job titles at universities that have no direct research function: Senior Continuous Improvement Manager, Associated Director of Belonging and Engagement, Events and Experiential Learning Officer, Immigration Compliance Associate. The officials said it was not their job to micromanage university staffing decisions. They did not confirm that research spending had not fallen as a proportion of total university spending. Rupert Lowe also raised a broader question. He said Britain has the most lunatic energy policy, making it the most expensive country for energy in the world. He asked whether that energy policy was holding back the very innovation this spending is meant to produce. The officials said they were conscious of energy costs and were chipping away at the problem. They did not confirm that the energy policy was not holding back innovation. These are the facts as confirmed at the Public Accounts Committee today. This is the public record, new analysis every week. What Parliament says and what the numbers actually show. Subscribe if you want the full picture.